The flames had eaten through every wall by the time she stumbled into the clearing, her shotgun limp in one hand, the other dragging her little brother's boots through the dirt. Smoke poured from what used to be their kitchen window. The front porch collapsed with a roar behind her, sending a wave of sparks into the twilight. And there, beyond the rising heat shimmer, stood the man she'd once trusted with her life. He didn't run. He simply tipped his hat like it was a Sunday picnic, not the end of everything she'd ever known. "Ain't personal," he said before vanishing into the smoke. It was personal. Now she's got his name carved into the butt of her rifle, and every step she takes leaves ash behind. Before we jump back in, introduce yourself and where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dust Hollow was the kind of place where silence carried weight, where a boot scuff echoed louder than a gunshot, and folks had long since learned to speak more with their eyes than with their mouths. The town sat crouched between two broken hills, scorched by sun and forgotten by maps. Its wooden buildings leaned like tired men, worn soft by wind and time. Paint peeled from shutters like old skin. Horses drank from troughs filled more with dust than water. There wasn't a tree for 10 miles, just mesquite, the occasional thorn bush, and the bones of things too slow to run. She lived on the edge of it all, in a weather-warped cabin at the end of Dogtail Ridge. Folks called her the Widow Delaney, though no one ever asked about the name. Not since that winter 3 years back, when her husband's body was dragged from Dry Creek with his throat open clean as a butcher's cut. Some said it was a card game gone wrong. Others whispered he'd crossed the wrong rider. But everyone agreed on one thing: Delaney came back wrong. She didn't cry at the funeral. She didn't wear black. She just stood there in that threadbare green dress, one hand resting on the pistol at her hip like it was part of her. And when she looked up at the men gathered around the casket, half of them turned their eyes away. They still did. She'd been born with a limp, left leg dragging slightly like a clock one tick behind. But after her husband died, it got worse. Like her bones had learned grief and never unlearned it. The scar on her temple, hidden beneath the line of her hair, told another story. One no one had the nerve to ask about. Children stared. Mothers pulled them close. Men offered polite nods in passing, but never lingered. There were no real friends left. Just the old dog that limped beside her, same side, same rhythm, and the wind that never quite stopped crying through the hills. At the general store, the whispers followed her like her own shadow. Crazy thing she is. Talks to herself sometimes. They say she keeps his rifle cleaned, even sleeps with it. Wouldn't surprise me if she was the one who did him in, truth be told. She never answered. Didn't need to. She'd learned early that there were worse things than being alone. Like trusting the wrong man. Like letting your guard down. Like believing you could make a life with someone. And waking up to smoke choking the breath from your lungs. And still, every morning she hauled water from the well, fed the chickens, patched the roof, not because it mattered, but because she didn't know how to stop. It was the waiting that got to her. The long hours between sunrise and dusk, when the sky blistered and the dirt cracked underfoot. That's when she'd think of the fire. The heat, the screams, the betrayal. He'd smiled as it burned. It ain't personal. Her lips curled at the memory. Not quite a sneer. Not quite grief. Just the bitter taste of memory turning to iron in her blood. The locket still hung around her neck. Blackened now from smoke, the hinge rusted. Inside, a sketch of her younger self and the man she once called husband. She hadn't opened it in months. Couldn't bear to look at him and not see the truth. Before we dive deeper into the story, just a quick note. I'm Thomas, the voice behind this narration. If you enjoy how it sounds, let me know in the comments so we can keep the same voice in future videos. By noon, the saloon's piano would start its off-key tune, and the heat would drive the town's few menfolk into its dark belly. But she never went near it. Too many ghosts in that place, that's where they met after all. Him with his sharp eyes and softer voice playing a hand of 5-card draw and calling her beautiful without blinking. He'd taught her to shoot, to ride, said he'd never leave her side. He left anyway, and lit the match himself. That day, her brother had been home, 10 years old. The kind of boy who dreamed of being a lawman, practiced drawing with a wooden pistol in the mirror. She remembered screaming his name through the smoke, kicking in the back door with her shoulder, dragging him out by his boots, his face red from the heat, eyes closed. He'd lived. But the boy she once knew had stayed in that fire. What came out was silent, distant. His drawings grew darker, and he only spoke to her now, never to strangers. Folks called them cursed, said the devil had left his mark on their cabin. Some even crossed themselves when they passed by, but she wasn't scared of the devil. She was hunting a man, and when she found him, when her boots caught up to his heels, he'd understand what personal meant. The wind changed on a Tuesday. Subtle at first, just a shift in the way it moved the dust. Less cruel, more curious. The kind of wind that didn't howl or bite, just watched. She noticed it because she'd learned to read the land like scripture. Every snap of a twig, every shadow that fell wrong. That day, as she stood outside the general store with her sack of grain slung over one shoulder, the stillness felt held. Then came the hoofbeats. Measured, confident, not rushed, not wandering. A man on a black horse, tall in the saddle, wide brim hat casting his face in half shadow. He rode straight through the town center like he'd been here before. But not recently. His coat was trail-worn, dusted in red dirt from beyond the ridge, the kind of dust that didn't settle here, not unless you brought it with you. She kept her eyes low, pretending to fuss with her bag, but every inch of her was listening. He dismounted in front of the saloon and tied his horse with quiet precision. A quick glance around the square, and then his gaze found her, direct, not invasive, just curious. Like a man seeing a piece of a puzzle he didn't know was missing. She turned sharply, headed down the boardwalk, her limp exaggerated by the uneven planks. Inside, the usual murmurs had already started. You see him? Rides like he ain't afraid of nothing. Must be another bounty man. But she knew better. That wasn't the gait of someone hunting gold. That was the gait of someone carrying weight. Later, back at her cabin, she sat at the edge of the porch cleaning her rifle. Same routine every evening, barrel, bolt, sight. She wasn't expecting company. No one ever came up the ridge, not unless they meant trouble or were too dumb to know better. The dog growled first, low and uncertain. Then she heard the footstep, not on the gravel, on wood. She cocked the hammer and raised the rifle slowly until she saw him. Same coat, same horse, now tied to her split fence post. He stood 5 steps from the porch, hat still on, hands visible, unarmed. I ain't here to cause trouble, he said. His voice was rough, low, like boot leather left in the sun. Just heard this ridge had the best view in the valley. She didn't lower the rifle. Lots of views, pick another. He gave a soft smile, not mocking. I will. Soon as you tell me your name. Her eyes narrowed. You already know it, or you wouldn't be here. Silence. The dog growled again, stepping forward, but she gave a sharp whistle and it stopped. He lifted a hand. Not the one you were given, the one you kept. That made her pause. She lowered the rifle an inch, not from trust, but curiosity. Why you here? Passing through, he said. But sometimes, passing through means stopping where the wind pulls. A long silence stretched between them, heavy with things neither one of them knew how to say. He finally tipped his hat and stepped back. I'll see you again, widow. She didn't correct him, just watched him disappear down the hill the same way he came, quiet as fog, steady as judgment. That night she couldn't sleep. Over the next few days she saw him again. Not often, just glimpses. A shadow near the well, a flash of a coat beyond the chapel. Once she caught him watching her from the butcher's roofline, eyes locked in quiet study. He didn't approach again, but she felt his presence like a note that never stopped ringing, and something strange began to shift. At the saloon, the barkeep mentioned him. Named Silas, said he was a tracker, Fought for the South once, but came back north with more scars than medals. Others weren't so welcoming. I don't trust drifters, muttered Old Man Riley. They ride in quiet and leave louder. He's been asking questions too, said the blacksmith. About her. That part hit like ice water. She kept her hand closer to her pistol after that. When she walked the main street, she felt eyes on her from both sides. Curious, suspicious. She was used to whispers, but now they carried weight. Still, she couldn't stop thinking about him, about how he didn't flinch when she stared, about how he'd asked for her name, not the one etched on town records, but the one buried beneath. Grief and ash. One evening she found him again, not in town, on her land. He sat on a rock at the edge of the ridge, legs stretched, hands resting on his knees. Didn't even turn when she approached. You follow all your ghosts this far? She asked. He smiled. Only the ones that walk. They sat in silence for a long time, watching the valley below. Orange light fell over the hills, and somewhere a hawk cried out. It should have felt dangerous. It didn't. You looking for someone? She finally asked. He nodded. A man. Burned something that didn't belong to him. Her breath hitched, but only slightly. Lots of that going around. He turned to her then, gaze direct. You ever think about what you'd do when you find him? I don't think. I know. He nodded again, slow. That's why I came up this ridge. Another long silence. She didn't ask why, because part of her already knew. The storm came on a Thursday. Not rain. Dust Hollow hadn't seen rain in 6 weeks, but wind, dry and slicing. It scoured the streets, rattled shutters, and pulled the sky into a bruised gray. People stayed indoors, doors bolted, windows latched, except for her. The widow Delaney walked straight through it, coat flapping behind her like a torn flag. She had a purpose. Word had reached her that he was near. Not Silas. The other one. The man who'd burned her home and left her brother barely breathing. A merchant passing through swore he saw him riding west 2 nights ago, crossing the dry Ridge Basin, so she came into town to ask questions. The sheriff stopped her before she reached the saloon. Back to the ridge, Delaney, he said. Ain't nothing here for you. I'm not here for your protection, she replied. He stepped in close, hand resting casually on his belt, right above the revolver. We all know what happened. You lost more than most. But some of us are just trying to keep peace. Her jaw clenched. That man is still breathing. There's no peace till he's in the dirt. Then a voice rose behind her. She's the peace that left this town cursed. It was Mercy Fallon, the preacher's wife. Dressed in widow's black, though her husband still clung to life 2 doors down. The real preacher had left years ago. The building stood hollow now, the bell silenced, but she wore her righteousness like a crown. She's the reason we sleep uneasy. The one who brought fire with her grief, Mercy hissed, fingers shaking. You want to protect the town? Start by sending the devil's bride back where she belongs. Others gathered. Whispers turned sharp. Someone tossed a stone. It missed, but the meaning struck true. She didn't flinch. But inside, something cracked. Not rage, not even sadness. Just hollowness. A knowing that no matter how long she walked these roads, she'd never belong again. That night, she packed her saddlebag. She didn't tell her brother. He'd grown used to her comings and goings. But she left the locket on his nightstand, the sketch faded, the chain still warm from her skin. She rode until the dust turned to frost. The old pines rose like black fingers through the dusk, and the wind carried the cold down her coat, through the seams, into her bones. Somewhere in the hills, a coyote called. She ignored it, pressed forward. She had no real destination, just away from judgment, from whispers, from the gnawing truth that maybe she'd failed. Maybe vengeance didn't fix the broken pieces. Maybe she'd been chasing a ghost and dragging her soul through fire for nothing. By morning, she collapsed. Not dramatic, just slow, knees giving way in the snow. Her horse kept walking for a few steps before stopping. The sky turned white above her, and the silence wrapped around her tight. That's where he found her. No fanfare, no shouting, just the crunch of boots on frost, and a quiet, "You always this stubborn?" She opened one eye. His coat brushed against her shoulder as he knelt beside her, pulling a wool blanket from his saddlebag. "Didn't think I'd need help," she muttered, teeth chattering. "You didn't," he said. "You needed someone to walk beside you when your knees gave out." She let him wrap the blanket around her without protest. He didn't carry her, didn't make a show of strength. Just built a fire, boiled coffee, and let the silence work its way between them. They stayed there until night fell. "I lost my brother once," he said, eyes on the flames. "War took his voice. Same way fire took your home." She turned her head slightly. "Did he ever speak again?" He shook his head. "But I learned to listen without needing words." She closed her eyes. Not from weariness, but because for once, someone wasn't trying to fix her. Just sit beside the wreckage. She woke the next morning still warm, still wrapped in the wool. He was tending the horses, back turned. It was then she realized. He hadn't watched her sleep, hadn't stayed for control. He'd just stayed. That was the difference. Later, as they saddled up, she looked at him with new eyes. "You followed me." "I did." "Why?" He paused, adjusting the reins. "Because when a fire leaves a trail, sometimes it's worth following, to see what rises from the ashes." They rode back slowly. No one welcomed them. No one waved. But as they passed the chapel ruins, a small child peeked from behind the doorframe, then waved just once and ducked back inside. The widow Delaney didn't smile, but she nodded. Because sometimes trust isn't earned with grand gestures. Sometimes it begins with being there, when no one else is. The cold didn't last. By spring, the valley bloomed, not with flowers. The earth was still too mean for that, but with something harder, more honest, the kind of green that fought through stone just to live a little while. So did they. They built the corral first, hand-hewn posts, dragged from pine stands up the ridge, sunk into dry soil with blistered palms and stubborn will. He'd swing the axe. She'd set the posts. Silas never asked for help, and she never offered it. They simply worked beside each other until the job was done. She taught him to read the land, the wind shifts, the way mule deer moved before a storm, how to tell when the creek would flood. He taught her how to mend tack with patience, how to trim hooves without cutting too deep. They didn't speak much, not during the work. But come nightfall, after the horses quieted and the stew simmered, they'd sit by the fire and let the silence say what their mouths still couldn't. One night he turned toward her with a soft breath. "I was married once," he said. Her spoon paused mid-air. "She died in childbirth. It was my fault. I sent for the wrong doctor, thought I knew better." He didn't cry, just looked into the flames like they owed him an answer. "I carry that," he said, "everywhere I go." She let a long silence settle, then said quietly, "You loved her. That's not a crime." His jaw twitched. "Love's not always enough." Neither said more. But that night, when the wind rose and the cabin creaked, she didn't sleep by the hearth. She lay near his bedroll, shoulder to shoulder, breathing slow. Not lovers yet, not quite. But the ground was thawing. They named the ranch Half Ridge, because it stood halfway between her grief and his guilt. The town still called her the widow, behind closed doors. But some started bringing trade. A saddlebag here, a broken wheel there, small signs of something mending. Even the sheriff stopped by one morning, hat in hand. "You're still armed," he noted, eyes on her rifle. She nodded. "So are you." They didn't smile, but the tension eased enough for him to drink her coffee before he left. Then came the rider, dust-covered, panic in his eyes. "You know this man?" he asked Silas, holding up a sketch, crude but clear. A scar along the left cheek, eyes hollow like something rotten behind them. Silas went pale. She didn't ask why, not yet. But that night, she watched him stare out the window longer than usual, fingers twitching at his belt. He told her everything 3 days later. His name wasn't just Silas. It was Silas Kane. And once, long ago, he'd ridden with a band of regulators turned bounty killers. One of them, a man named Cutterbeck, had turned the group into something worse. Started burning homesteads. killing for silence, until Silas turned on him. I left. Thought I buried that life, he said. But Cutter didn't die. And he never forgets. She stared at him for a long time. So he's coming here? Silas nodded. You bring hell to my doorstep, she said. No anger, just fact. He looked away. I'll leave before he gets close. She stepped forward. Don't. He turned. Met her eyes. You said once love wasn't enough, she whispered. But it might be, if we stay. They fortified Half Ridge in silence, reinforced the walls, dug trenches by the north gate. She melted iron into spikes, buried them beneath the main trail. He scouted from the high bluff, rifle on his back, but with every plan came fear. Not of dying. They were both familiar with death, but of what would be left after. The night before Cutter was expected, they sat by the fire again. This time, closer. She laid her hand on his chest, felt the rhythm beneath. I lost a child, she said, the words brittle. Before the fire, before my brother was hurt. He didn't speak, didn't flinch. I still hear her in the wind, she whispered. Some nights I think, maybe she was spared this life. Maybe it was mercy. Silas reached out, took her hand in his, not to comfort, but to share the weight. And for the first time in years she let herself cry. No shame, no hiding, just firelight and two people made of scars and second chances. But peace never holds forever. They heard the horses at dawn, 4 riders, Cutter at the lead, face thinner, teeth gritted, scar stretched across his cheek like a lash. Behind him, smoke rose from the south ridge. A ranch burned. Silas stood, in front of the gate, rifle ready. I end this, he said. She stepped beside him. No, she said. We end it. The gunfire was fast and ugly. Cutter didn't wait for words. He fired first, always had, and chaos followed like a dog, on his heels. Bullets tore through the fence, shattered timber. Horses screamed and smoke filled the air. Silas moved like someone who'd been here before, because he had. He flanked hard left, cutting down 2 riders before the third even saw him. But Cutter wasn't one of them. No, Cutter came through, the fire like it belonged to him, laughing, rifle slung, a knife in hand. Thought you could start over? He yelled. With her? After what we did? Silas stepped forward, unarmed now, just steady eyes. I paid, he said. I left it behind. You don't leave blood, Cutter spat. Then she stepped between them. No hesitation, just fire in her spine. Then take mine, she said, if that's what you came for. Cutter blinked, just once. And in that pause, that breath, Silas struck, a single shot, clean. Cutter Beck hit the dirt like a dropped promise. The town came in the aftermath, not to help, not at first, but to watch, to count the bodies, to whisper again. That's when Silas did it. He turned from the blood-soaked ground, from the wreckage, and walked straight to her. No speeches, no theatrics, just one step, then another. And then, with every eye watching, he reached out and took her hand, held it tight, and said, in front of the town that once called her a curse, she's the reason I came back, the reason I stayed. If that offends you, good. I'm done hiding from cowards. A few townsfolk shifted uncomfortably, but one, the sheriff, tipped his hat, didn't speak, just turned and walked away. That was enough. They buried the dead. That night under cypress trees far from the ranch. Not with crosses, just stones. And silence. Afterward, she sat by the fire, the wind tugging gently at her hair. I thought I'd die with that locket in my hand, she whispered. Thought revenge was all I had left. Silas knelt beside her. You have more. She looked at him. What now? He didn't answer. Just held out a ring. Iron. Forged from the same nails they'd used to build Half Ridge. No diamond. No gold. Just something real. She stared at it for a long time, then slid it on her finger slow as sunrise. They wed beneath stars. No preacher, No vows written on paper, just the hush of pine branches overhead, and a single promise shared by firelight. We stay, no matter what comes. In the distance, an owl called, low and solemn. She smiled, not because it was easy, but because she'd finally chosen herself. Not the grief, not the ghost of a man who betrayed her, but the quiet woman who survived it all. 1 year later, a child was born in the back room of their rebuilt cabin. A girl. They named her Ember because she rose from fire, just like her mother. And every night when the world turned dark and the wind called to old pain, the widow Delaney, now just Clara, would hold Ember close, whispering stories of ash, of loss, of a man who stood beside her, and a town that had to learn what mercy looked like. She was never a curse. She was someone's miracle all along. Subscribe, and let me introduce you to the next miracle tomorrow.